The question isn't how Genghis Khan conquered half the known world. The real question is what kind of mind designs a weapon out of hunger itself. For most generals, starvation was a tragedy of war. For Genghis Khan, known to history as the Great Khan of the Mongols, it became a precision tool, sharpened and perfected until it broke empires without a single arrow fired. He didn't just attack cities. He sealed them, isolated them, and then turned their own bodies into enemies. A slow-burning terror that rotted morale long before steel reached the gates. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe because the story you're about to hear is darker than anything the textbooks dare to tell. The year was 1219 when Genghis Khan invaded the Khwarezmian Empire. The Mongols stormed across the borders like a living storm, but when they reached the fortified city of reshaped, something changed. They didn't attack. Not immediately. Instead, they surrounded the city, tight as a noose around a neck. Eyewitness accounts describe how the Mongols mapped every well, every farmland, every path carrying grain into the city. Then they cut all of them. No food. No water. No escape. Wells were poisoned with dead animals. Fields were torched before the grain could ripen. Every gate was lined with archers who would kill anyone trying to slip through the night. Inside the walls, panic grew like mold. Bread turned to dust. Dogs vanished first. Then rats. Then silence. This wasn't improvisation. Mongol engineers were trained to calculate exactly how long a city could last before it imploded from within. They knew when desperation would begin, when riots would break out, and when the defenders would consider surrender. Some cities capitulated before a single blade was drawn. Others held on, until starvation stripped them of every scrap of dignity. Persian historian Malik Juvayni recorded scenes that sound almost impossible to imagine. Families boiling leather, chewing grass, scraping walls for anything edible. And when the bodies began to pile up unburied, he said, "The dogs feasted on the flesh of the faithful." When the gates finally fell, the Mongols were not saviors, they were executioners. Those who survived the famine were too weak to resist. Most were massacred. Some were enslaved. None forgot that starvation had done the killing long before the Mongols entered. The message was clear. Resist and you won't simply die, you will decay. Where the Mongol armies rode, cities collapsed. Where cities collapsed, women disappeared. Genghis Khan, called the universal ruler, did not only conquer land. He conquered people, their lineages, their futures. After the fall of Bokhara in 1220, entire populations were funneled outward like livestock being sorted. Men were executed or enslaved. Children were dragged screaming from their mothers. And the women were taken as spoils. Juvayni writes that after each conquest the Mongols separated men from women, the children from their mothers, and drove them like herds of sheep. The comparison wasn't poetic. It was literal. Women were lined up, ranked by beauty, age, and social class. Noble women were set aside for the highest-ranking generals. Some were claimed by the Khan himself. Others were distributed among soldiers as rewards. Beauty became a liability. Status became a curse. There are accounts, from Persia to China to the Rus states, describing Mongol commanders taking particular pleasure in capturing the wives and daughters of defeated nobles. It wasn't about companionship or desire. It was about domination. The total erasure of an enemy's legacy. Most women lost their names the moment they were taken. Many were absorbed into Mongol households, forced into marriages they could not refuse. Others were sold into slavery across the vast empire, disappearing into the markets of Samarkand, Karakoram, and even the Yuan court in China. For the Mongol war machine, people were not citizens. They were resources. And women, young, healthy, or noble, were among the most valuable of all. But the darkest chapter of Mongol warfare wasn't starvation. It wasn't enslavement. It was the creation of the human shield line. A tactic so brutal that even hardened chroniclers wrote about it with horror. When Genghis Khan founded the Mongol Empire in 1206, he rebuilt his military around a ruthless principle. Every conquered person has a use. Every enemy body is a possible tool. During the Khwarezmian campaign, especially at the siege of Gurganj in 1221, this principle was unleashed at full force. As the Mongols approached the city walls and the defenders prepared their archers, Genghis Khan issued a cold, simple order. Push the prisoners forward. All of them. Thousands of captured civilians, women, children, elderly men, were forced into a line stretching across the battlefield. They were not armed. They were not protected. They were simply driven forward, step by step, toward the city's archers. To the defenders on the walls, the first wave of attackers were not soldiers, but their own people. Arrows rained down. Bodies fell. The survivors stumbled forward, crying, screaming, begging. Behind them, Mongol soldiers advanced untouched, letting the human shield line absorb the first deadly barrage. It was psychological warfare at its rawest, breaking an enemy's spirit by forcing them to kill their own. Some defenders hesitated. Some broke. Some surrendered on the spot, unable to continue the slaughter. For the Mongols it didn't matter. The tactic worked, brutally, efficiently, and without mercy. Every human body, even in death, served the empire. Persian historian Adamalik Juvayni, the man who walked in the shadows of Mongol conquest and recorded what humanity wished it could forget, once wrote a sentence that still chills the bones of anyone who reads it. They used the people of one city to batter down the next. To Juvayni, this wasn't a metaphor. It was an observation, cold, clinical, horrifying, of a war machine that treated human life as ammunition. And nowhere was this clearer than in the Mongols' use of forced human shields. When a city resisted Mongol rule, there was rarely a second warning. Those captured alive were not granted mercy, they were granted utility. Captives were bound together with ropes, shoved to the front lines, and used in ways that defy imagination. Some were tied in a long, trembling chain and marched ahead of siege towers, their bodies forming a moving wall meant to absorb the enemy's arrows. Some were forced to dig trenches under constant fire, filling moats with their own blood and bodies. Others hauled stones, wood, and siege equipment until they collapsed from exhaustion or injuries. If they survived, their fate was somehow worse. When their usefulness ended, they were killed. Quietly. Efficiently. A resource expended. This was the Mongol law of war. If you cannot fight for us, you can die for our victory. The message spread faster than the armies themselves. Resist, and your people will die to protect the Mongols. Surrender, and perhaps only your leaders will fall. Morale crumbled in city after city, sometimes before a single Mongol arrow had even been loosed. To Genghis Khan, war wasn't a duel between armies. It was a confrontation of entire populations. Every man, woman, and child could be transformed into a pawn, a shield, or a warning. In 1223 at the Battle of the Kalka River, a coalition of Rus princes and Kipchak allies thought their numbers could match Mongol speed. They were wrong. The Mongols crushed them like grass beneath hooves. But the true horror came after the battle. The captured princes, including Mstislav of Kiev, expected ransom or diplomatic treatment. Nobles across the medieval world believed that rank was armor, that their titles protected them even in defeat. The Mongols disagreed. Subutai and Jebe, the two brilliant generals serving under Genghis Khan, designed a punishment that was equal parts execution and message, and a spectacle meant to be remembered for generations. The princes were laid face down on the ground, hands bound, unable to move. They were still alive, still breathing, still aware. Then, the Mongols erected a massive wooden platform on top of their bodies. They didn't rush. They built it carefully, making sure the weight would be evenly distributed, not to spare the victims but to maximize the agony. When the platform stood tall and stable, the Mongol commanders climbed atop it, sat down cross-legged, and began to feast. Wine flowed. Meat was carved. Songs were sung. Above, a celebration. Below, a suffocating nightmare. Every bite the generals enjoyed pushed the platform deeper into the soil. Every step crushed ribs. Every laugh drowned out the muffled cries beneath the planks. Some chronicles say it took hours for the last prince to die. Why this method? Because Mongol law held a strange taboo. The blood of nobles must not be shed. So they found a loophole, a death that spilled no blood but shattered every bone. When the feast ended, the princes were corpses. The Mongols had not merely killed them, they had erased them. This execution was more than punishment. It was psychological warfare. A message to every ruler watching. Your titles mean nothing. Your honor means nothing. Your body is nothing. Not all Mongol punishments were theatrical. Some were brutally straightforward, intended to be seen from the city walls and never forgotten. One of the most feared was the sentence for betrayal. Being tied to the back of a horse and dragged until death. This punishment wasn't for enemy soldiers on the battlefield. It was reserved for something worse in the Mongol worldview. Those who broke trust. Those who deceived the Khan. those who surrendered a city and later rebelled. To betray Genghis Khan was to break the cosmic order he believed he enforced. And the Mongols believed such chaos demanded a death that made a statement. The execution began with dislocation. The prisoners' arms tied so tight behind their back that resistance became impossible. Then a rope was fastened around their waist or ankles and tied to the saddle of a mounted horse. At a signal, the horse was whipped into a gallop. The body jerked forward. Skin scraping, bones slamming against the earth, dust exploding with each impact. The victim was dragged across rocks, fields, roads, sometimes through entire encampments so everyone could watch. Death depended on the terrain. A smoother path meant a longer torment. A rocky one meant a mercifully shorter end. Historical records place this punishment across Central Asia and the Middle East during the Mongol advance. Governors who secretly negotiated with rival powers, local leaders who surrendered too easily, defectors who tried to escape Mongol control, all met the same fate. And when the dragging ended, the body was left untouched, broken, mangled, unrecognizable, in front of the city gates as a warning. Loyalty is life. Disobedience is annihilation. To the Mongols, war was not about honor, not about fairness, not even about bloodshed. It was about results. The Khan's philosophy was brutally simple. If fear brings victory faster than steel, then fear is the sharper weapon. Captives became shields. Nobles became planks beneath a feast. Traitors became dust dragged across the steppe. There was no mercy, no hesitation, no line the Mongols would not cross if it meant securing obedience. For them, the world was a chessboard, and every human life was a piece to be moved, sacrificed, or destroyed. Genghis Khan's empire did not run on chaos. It ran on orders so strict that even breathing against the will of the Khan could become a crime. At the heart of this system was the Yassa, a codified set of laws that welded the Mongol world together. The Yassa demanded absolute loyalty, not almost, not sometimes, but total, unquestioning obedience. Anyone who fractured that unity, even in the smallest way, was treated not as a rebel, but as a disease that needed to be cut out immediately. To the Mongols, treason was more than betrayal. It was an insult to destiny, an attempt to weaken a force they believed chosen by heaven itself. And because of that, punishment did not require theater or ceremony. There were no courts, no lengthy arguments, no second chances. Judgment was instant. Execution was direct. The message was unmistakable. Their violence wasn't random. It was a system, precise, calibrated, and engineered to reshape civilizations. The Mongol Empire didn't simply destroy enemies, it destroyed the idea of resistance. Cities burned not in chaos, but in a methodical sequence. Populations disappeared not in rage but in strategy. Each execution, each sacrifice, each terror tactic was designed to make the next conquest easier. This was how nomads, people once dismissed as scattered horsemen of the steppe, rose to rule the largest land empire in human history. Not through numbers, not through technology, but through fear sharpened into policy. Their punishments became stories. Their stories became warnings. And those warnings traveled faster than their armies. As chroniclers later observed, many cities opened their gates before a single arrow was fired, because they had heard what happened to those who didn't. The Mongols' justice system was not a collection of cruel acts. It was a psychological engine crafted to break the will of entire kingdoms. In the ashes of conquered lands, one truth echoed everywhere. Defy the Khan and the world you know will end. Persian historian Adamalik Juvayni, who witnessed the aftermath of Mongol campaigns with his own eyes, summarized their method with chilling simplicity. They came, they sapped, they burnt, they slew, they plundered, and they departed. His words weren't poetry. They were a warning. And centuries later, the shadow of that warning still lingers. Comment below. How do you think the Mongols' brutal system of punishment helped transform them from nomadic warriors into rulers of an empire that reshaped history?